This video is going to go through what the difference is between a genetically modified organism and a transgenic organism is. These words often come up in multiple choice questions, sometimes short answer questions. They're nice easy marks if you can keep the two of them separated. So here is the dot point. It's actually going to be split into 4 videos. So the first video we're going to do now is going to be distinguishing between genetically modified organisms and transgenic ones. The next one will be their use in agriculture. So how we use them in agriculture will be another one. And then we'll tell you why, and we'll give you some providing resistance to insect predation. We'll talk about crop productivity, and we'll talk about resistance to disease. And then the last video will go through the biological, social, and ethical implications, like we did just before with gene cloning. So again, here is the same key point. With all of our GMO technologies, you have to remember the benefit and the reason that they work is because the genetic code is universal. It means it doesn't matter if you're an ant, a human, a bacterium, all of our DNA has the same 4 bases, and they all read the code the same way. The same 3 bases in a codon will code for the same amino acid in all living things on Earth. So therefore, you get to transfer genes quite easily between species, and that's going to help us. So these are some gaps on page 6 for you. The next one is the difference between a GMO organism and a transgenic organism. So I'm going to do this with a bit of a very simple Venn diagram. So if you have GMOs like this, genetically modified organisms are anything in which its genome or its DNA has been altered. Now, but in particular, its genome has been altered. Why genome and not DNA? Because the genome tells us it has had a gene altered. If you've just altered its DNA, perhaps you've altered DNA that was in its introns, for example. And if you've altered DNA in an intron, it won't affect its genes. So it needs to be that a gene itself or the genome is altered. Then we get this little subgroup of GMOs here, and this is the transgenic organisms. So a GMO is anything with the genome altered. A transgenic organism has to mention DNA from another species. Okay, so you might be given a question where you've said, a pig that has been genetically modified to exhibit the jellyfish gene for fluorescence. Now that is a genetically modified organism, but it is also a transgenic organism because the gene from the jellyfish, one species, has been taken out and put into the pig. That's the other species. So transgenic is a subgroup of GMO. So this is what I like to think of it. Not all GMOs are transgenic, but all transgenic organisms are genetically modified organisms. So that's why it's a little subgroup within the larger group of GMOs. So for example, what you might do with a GMO that's not transgenic, or an example of that might be removing a gene. So say we remove the seed gene. This makes it a GMO, but it doesn't make it transgenic because we haven't put in a gene from another species. So it's not transgenic, but it is a GMO. The transgenic process involves taking a gene from a different, and I'm going to say it over and over again, transgenic is a different species and injecting it into the species of a different type. Okay, so you might take a gene from a bacterium and inject it into a plant, and that would be a transgenic, genetically modified organism. And that is all I want to say on that.